on the debate. Janet Ecker, former PC finance minister, now with the Toronto Financial Services Alliance. She's the president of that. David Tabucci, former PC cabinet minister, now a partner with the law firm Fogler-Rubinoff. And Donald Blair, PC party activist and political consultant. And this is a Your Agenda Thursday, where we invite you to be part of the discussion, so you can reach us by email at theagenda@tvo.org, on Twitter at twitter.com #YourAgenda, or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/theagenda. Our fifth column blogger Mike Miner is also hosting a live chat on our Inside Agenda blog at tvo.org/theagenda, and on our Facebook page at facebook.com/theagenda. So please dial us up, join the debate. We'll get your comments and questions up on the screen throughout the program. Nice to have you guys here tonight. Thanks for coming in. Donald, first time for you, so we're glad you're making your television debut with us tonight.
Thank you.
Well, in case anybody missed it, and I'm sure you three did not, the campaign is on, and we're 51 weeks away, and the PCs are taking out ads. And if you missed it at home, here's what it looks like. The new Ontario PC Party advertisement coming to a theater near you right now. Roll tape, please.
Just keeps taking from your household budget. Skyrocketing hydro bills. His sneaky eco-tax. The HST tax grab. You keep paying for it.
I'm Tim Hudak. Growing up in Fort Erie, you didn't spend on things you couldn't afford. Now people are telling me that they just can't afford this government. We've got to get electricity bills under control, focus on frontline health care, and as a dad, I know we need to protect the family budget. We need change here in Ontario.
To learn more, visit timhudak.ca.
Okay, and we follow that up. Michael, let's just go right into the next series of graphics here, because there have been some public opinion surveys come out the last week or two, and they have been pretty significant if you're following Ontario politics. A few weeks ago, the Toronto Star and Angus Reid released this. 76% of people said they wanted a different party in power. 71% of those surveyed thought the McGuinty government is on the wrong track. And among decided voters, 41% said they would vote for the Progressive Conservatives. That's majority government territory, incidentally. 29% said Dalton McGuinty's Liberals. 22% said Andrea Horwath's NDP. And Mike Schreiner's the leader of the Green Party. 8% said they would vote for the Greens. According to Greg Lyle, though, of Innovative Research Group, there is a big question mark in this election campaign, and that's this guy. Almost 6 in 10 people, when asked who's the leader of the Ontario PC Party, could not name Tim Hudak. Let's find out how serious that is. Okay, 1 year and counting until the next election. Janet, 6 in 10 people have no clue who the leader of the PC Party is. Is that a problem?
Well, actually, opposition leaders in Ontario frequently go into elections not being very well known because they never get the attention that a premier gets. So it's not unusual that an opposition leader would have that experience. And I think what Tim's team is trying to do with the ads is to get out there and define himself and give them a profile of what they want the public to see before people start tuning into the election and start paying attention a little bit more. I mean, it's a year away, so people aren't paying that much attention. I mean, they know the premier, they see the premier on the news on a regular basis. So you've got to be very careful when you have that kind of blank screen that the other guys don't paint it for you.
Had you seen that ad before just now?
No, I hadn't.
That's first time?
First time for me.
What'd you think of it?
Well, first of all, I was amused by the lead-in because it was pretty ingenious having someone snatch the money right out of your pocketbook. And it reminds me of a lot of things. Remember back in '95, I mean, our issues were pocketbook issues. The fact that we were losing jobs in Ontario, the fact that taxes were going up, very similar in nature. And I think Janet's quite right. I mean, it's early days right now. I don't care who the opposition leader was, whether it's Dalton McGuinty or Mike Harris. Who the heck could have named them a year before the election? But I think it's very important for them to do this groundwork now, to get out and say, this is who Tim Hudak is. If you recall, John Tory, no one did any branding with John Tory, and then of course the opposition started, the whole silver spoon in the mouth sort of thing. And that became what his branding was, quite opposite to the way the real John Tory is. But if you don't take that advantage now and define yourself, other people will.
Is that why, Donald, we're seeing an ad a year, 51 weeks before an election?
I absolutely think so. I mean, pardon me, one of the things that we also have to remember too is that Tim Hudak has only been the leader of the Ontario PC Party for a year. And in that year, he spent little over a year.
June of '09.
But in that time, he spent much of his time getting out to different ridings across the province, introducing himself and the party and the caucus, and trying to get people to understand what it is the party represents and what they're trying to do. And I think I've seen this ad. I saw it actually the day it was released on the party website, and it's really it does give people a great understanding of who Tim is, what he stands for, and the fact that he is no different than the majority of middle-class working families in Ontario who have been seeing nothing but more money being taken out of their wallets.
Well, since so few people apparently know who he is, Janet, one of the reasons we've asked you three in here tonight is to fill in some of the blanks, because you sat, I guess, in caucus with him from 1995 to 2003, in cabinet, I guess, for a couple of those years as well, a year and a half, something like that. What do we need to know about this guy?
Well, I think personally, what you see is what you get. I mean, Tim.
Is that good?
I think so. I mean, listen, Tim's a friend, and I quite like him.
Do you support him in the leadership?
No.
Neither did he?
No.
We're on the
but
same team.
Yeah, that's all right.
You were both with Christine Elliott?
Yeah. But
Who were you
that's
with?
okay.
I was with Randy Hillier.
Okay, so the three of you didn't support him for leader.
Yeah.
I think that says something, don't you?
Well, look, we all make different decisions in leadership races, but I think what's important is Tim. I think he's worked for it. He's earned it. He won a good, strong leadership campaign. He's been in politics now for a long time. He knows the game, and while that is also, I mean, people like to make that a downside too, that, well, you're just a politician. But I think having experience will help, but because he's going up against a very experienced premier. I mean, Dalton McGuinty's been through dark days in politics and good days in politics, and he's lost and he's won. And he will be a very formidable opponent for Hudak. But Tim was always very smart, was always very committed, was always good to work with, always did his homework at the cabinet table. So it's going to be a really interesting race.
I want to read this one out loud. We have something just came in via email. Her Majesty's loyal leader of the Ontario opposition does a fine job serving his role, yet is it filled with a spite and venom reminiscent of debate in the southern states? There is this thing. I tell you, I went to this presentation that Greg Lyle gave from the Innovative Research Group a week or so ago, and on the question of, do you find Hudak, McGuinty, Horvath too negative? Hudak was number one with a bullet. Everybody surveyed found he was far more negative than either of the other two people. We see it reflected in that email. Is that a problem for him?
I don't think it will be. I mean, let's look back when Mr. McGuinty was in opposition. He didn't do a lot of the dirty work himself, but he had a rat pack doing that. They all got in the cabinet at one point in time too. One's running for mayor. So, someone's got to do the job as an opposition. Someone has to point out what's wrong with the legislation. Someone has to get the attention of the public.
But you're making the point here that McGuinty had somebody else do it for him. The public seems to think, at least according to Lyle's survey, that Hudak's doing it himself and it's affecting his image.
Well, what it does do, just think about what people think are negative qualities. I mean, John Tory. John Tory didn't do that either. But then, John Tory never changed. John Tory was always a gentleman who always was a very intelligent person. But he didn't change, but the expectations of him did. There's certain expectations your caucus has of you as well to lead. And, I know Tim. Tim is, to me, he's a real decent human being. He truly believes in the stuff he's saying about working families, middle-class families, because he does believe. I know him personally. So he's a decent person. Tim never gets the credit for being as intelligent as he is. He is a fairly smart young man. He's got an education. He was always had good things to say, smart things to say. When you cabinet, he's not one of those people who spoke up just to be heard.
Well,
he spoke when he had something to say.
Let me follow up on that a bit. Janet, to you on this, he likes to say, I was in cabinet, I had 3 senior economic portfolios. It's not really the case. You were in cabinet with him, right? I mean, he had what? He had tourism, he had consumer services or something like that. He was there for a year and a half, 2 years, max. I mean, you're going to say he's going to present himself to the people of Ontario with all of this experience and senior portfolios?
And culture,
true. And culture.
And culture too.
Again, not a senior portfolio.
But I think the thing you have to remember about politics is it's very, very fluid. I mean, Premier McGuinty hadn't held any cabinet positions. He is now the premier of the province. So it's a point that obviously the opposition, his critics will make about him, but I think the voters, that's not going to resonate with the voters. But
McGuinty didn't boast about his cabinet experience, and Tim is.
No, but I think, but you go back to what the Premier said during his, leadership and election, and he found things to talk about where he, and I can't remember, but he found things to talk about where, he was leader or had leadership ability or Premier ability. So, everybody pulls out of their background whatever you have. It's like a job interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you turn every position you had into the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's the same in politics.
Donald, let me try this with you. The knock on him is that he's Mike. I mean, I've heard two things. He's Mike Harris Jr., he's Mike Harris in short pants. Everybody's, and we're going to hear it, I'm sure, from the Liberals. They want to say he's the second coming of Mike Harris. Is that accurate?
I don't think it is. I think that there was a Mike Harris at the time that the province needed him. That was 15 years ago, and the province was in dire straits at the time. He, with my two distinguished colleagues here, have made a very good imprint on the province at that time, and I can say that obviously as a partisan conservative, but
I'm going to let it go tonight because we get anyway.
Thank you.
Sounds intelligent to me.
But I'm sure we wouldn't get into much argument, but I don't think it's whether we want to agree or disagree on how or what Mike Harris did. I don't think it's fair to call Tim Hudak the second coming of Mike Harris.
But he does say he is a common sense revolutionary. He doesn't walk away from anything of those years. He's proud of those years. He's proud of his association with Mike Harris. So why would it be unfair for the Liberals to tar him with that brush?
But that's different. That's different than, I mean, if he stood up and said, gee, I didn't really mean it. I didn't really agree with anything. I mean, so of course, and I mean, David and I also served in the same cabinet. We're very pleased to do so. So I think you can't walk away from where you came from, and it would be a big mistake if he did. But it is, what he does have to do is carve out his own identity, because this is not 1995. It's 2000 and whatever the heck year we're in. 2010.
There's so much that's different today than there was 15 years ago. I mean, there are certainly a lot of similarities.
Well, that's it. Dave was just saying there's a lot more in common.
But let me say this, if I can. I mean, first of all, what's wrong with Mike Harris? Number one, he came in at a time when the province was in dire straits. He had the willingness and the leadership to do something about it. Now, having said that, you're only as good as your cabinet that you have around you, the people you surround yourself with. And I would hazard a guess, people say, Mike Harris is neocon government. I don't think many people would say that my colleague here, or I, or a number of our colleagues.
No, but you would agree that in some parts of Ontario, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the achievements that you guys see that you had, but Mike Harris's name is still box office poison in a lot of parts of Ontario, including in this city we're in right now, where, again, Greg Lyle's numbers suggested that of those surveyed, by I think a 2 or a 3 to 1 margin, people have a negative rather than a positive impression of those years in the 416.
Yeah, but Tim would be, and I know he's not going to do this, but Tim would be very dumb to stand up and somehow try to say, I wasn't part of that or whatever, it was wrong. Yeah. He's not going to do that, and so that's part of who he is. But what will be important for the voters, certainly the other parties will try and do that, as they have been, and you would expect them to do that. But what Tim has to do is carve out his own identity, his own portfolio or platform, put that forward. They're starting to try and do that. But I think one of the challenges, getting back to the point you made about the negativity issue, on the one hand, political consultants and backroom organizers will tell you that negative works, and negative can work. But I think what the challenge for any new political leader when you're trying to put your identity out there for the public is that you have to have an identity that they like you, or they trust you, or they can relate to you in some way.
Has he got that yet?
Other than, and we'll see if he can do that. I mean, we know him personally, so and it's difficult for people to make judgments across a TV screen. But that, I think, for any politician, political leader, you have to be able to make that connection.
Well, let me put you on the spot, David.
Yeah,
you sat in cabinet with him for whatever it was, 2 years.
Yep.
Tell me, all right, I get cabinet solidarity and you can't reveal secrets, but does some story come to mind because of an intervention he made, a question he asked, a file he pursued, where you now can tell us these years later?
You could ask me that about almost everyone in that cabinet. It's hard to recall, because when you come up with cabinet consensus on these things, you do. But let me come back to what you said before.
Well, hang on, are you going to answer my question? Where he did something memorable and you want to tell us what it was?
I couldn't even tell you what I did was memorable. So, but let me tell you about the important cabinet postings you said before. I would beg to differ in a way, because he had culture. And culture is important in my view. And what culture allows Tim to do, along with other things, he's a smart guy. So he was observing what we need to have done, how we need to pay attention to the urban areas, to the cultural community. He's had some experience in these areas. Not only, forget about the cabinet postings, he also sat on a number of cabinet committees that made the decisions coming forward to the cabinet. So the experience that he had is broader than those positions. He sat on a number of these cabinet committees with us as well. So he's a smart fellow. He understands what we need to do. We need to address the urban areas. We need to address the cities. He understands that, and
Donald,
he will.
One of the things, Donald, that we just saw an email come up on the screen about was it's all well and good as a member of the loyal opposition to throw the brickbats the other way, but this person wanted to say, what does he stand for? Does he have any alternatives? And when are we going to see those? What's the answer to that?
I think that we're starting to see a lot. We've certainly started to see a lot of that over the last year year and a half that he's been leader. A lot of the issues that have been coming up through McGuinty's what we would call mismanagement, and some of the scandals and situations that have come up, he's come up with a serious plan to reverse some of the things that have gone wrong.
Like the HST?
The HST is something that he has said it's not the right time. This was a bad decision to do this at the time.
He's not going to revoke that, is he? The
Well,
answer is
I mean-
no. He's not going to revoke
Well,
it.
and
You're a
he's
former
actually-
finance minister. You know he won't.
And he's actually been, I think, smart not to say that he will revoke it, because I don't think, even if he were to win, I don't think he'd be able to, right? So, and
Well, he could if he wanted to.
well,
He's got to give the Fed 6 months' notice, and then he can get out of it. But I don't hear him saying he's going to.
no, and it. Again, I'm not close enough to his team to be able to speak on his behalf, and so I won't. But on that issue, but. I think one of the things, just getting back to the point about what I remember about Tim when he was in cabinet and whatever, two stories. One, and again, I don't remember what the issue was, but I can remember we were in some intense discussion, as happened from time to time in conversation, and his focus was on how to explain this to Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch. How do we tell the public? How do we, make sure that they're, and at the time, I can remember he was the only one around the table at the time who was saying that, and of course, as you know, with your experience in politics, Steve, that's the crucial thing. You can have the best policy in the world, but if you can't explain it to people so that it's relevant to them, you might as well forget about it. And so I remember thinking, and that was in his early days around cabinet, because I can remember thinking, oh, this, he's paying attention, and this is good. And when he was tourism minister, he had a wonderful, because there's always the little tourism grants that you give all the little fall fairs and county festivals, and every government loves to do them, and they're wonderful things to do for communities. And he got a little RV vehicle, a little motorhome thing, and he had a nice big sign on it, and I can't remember what he called it. It was some clever little thing about the something summer tour, and he went around every one of these festivals. He came to the Highland Games in my riding, which was a great local.
And people noticed that stuff.
People noticed it. He handed out the check. He worked the crowd, and as a local MPP, I was there as an MPP. It was just a really good thing for him to do. So it was that trying to connect to voters.
Tell me about this, David, because I unless I'm wrong, I think of you as a red Tory. I think of Janet Ecker's a red Tory.
I don't like labels, but
You don't like labels, but you're not running away from it.
I say reasonable Tory.
Donald, you're more small C conservative, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your party's, it's a biggish tent. You've got red Tories, right-wing Tories, social conservatives, libertarians. They're all sort of, trying to get along in that big tent.
Yeah.
What type of conservative is Hudak?
I think Tim's fairly pragmatic. My dealings with him, he's always seemed that way. And I just want to comment on what he stands for at the same time here. I believe Tim really believes in a lot of integrity in government. I think we need that right now. You look at every level in government, whether it's provincial, I won't say federal because I like them, but the provincial, municipal, you need to have integrity, and people need to have the transparency and accountability that they're begging for right now. The standard of people want right now, they're not even looking for talent or experience. They're looking for politicians who will be honest with him, and Tim will be that. He has always been that way, and that's something he does stand for.
Don't they always say that on the way in, and then, stuff happens in
You
public
can't
life?
say that about yourself, but I can say that about somebody else.
What kind of conservative do you think he is?
I would agree with David. I think he's much more of a pragmatic conservative. I think that there's a lot of values that appeal to a wide variety of conservatives that he's got, but I would say that he's a lot more of that kind of a pragmatic type of conservative. On the other hand, I also think that it's something I've noticed, certainly, especially with the municipal elections going on, there's a real serious need for, without naming names of the person who came up with this phrase, respect for taxpayers. I think that that's a real fundamental value that's missing. And I think regardless of who the leader of the party is, it's just a fundamental value that that Ontario Conservatives share and believe in. And I think it's been missing for a long time, and he definitely stands for that. There's a lot of comments that have been coming out of the organization, out of the party, and from him in caucus that represent that.
One thing, Janet, one thing it was pretty clear, I think, was that the Mike Harris government was not a social conservative government, and there were opportunities you guys had to do things that would have appealed much more directly to social conservatives, and you chose not to do them. I think people are going to start asking these questions about Tim Hudak. How much of a social conservative is he? I noticed in that ad, he's quite prominent with his wife. He's got a young child. I know that whenever I've seen him give numerous speeches, and he always refers to the fact that he's a family man. Is he a social conservative?
I don't think he is. I mean, and in terms of any dealings I've had with him, I wouldn't describe him that way. But at the same time, families are important to him. One, because he has one. Two, because that is part of who he is. And again, he's not going to walk away with that. And I think the voters need to see that is an important part of his particular personality and guiding, I guess, sort of something that'll be one of his guiding principles.
Here's something that just came up. Hudak wants to abolish the human rights tribunals. Is it in line with mainstream Ontario values to allow employers to discriminate based on race or gender? The suggestion here, David, is that he is not in the mainstream of the province, that he is somewhere off on the edges.
Well, we need to look at two things here, and I'm not going to sit here and speak for Tim on these issues, because obviously I was with another camp during this leadership campaign. But the thing that people find, the practical thing that people find when they form the government, I think he will, is that you now have to look at things a little bit differently and when you're governing. And you see that with the current government. You saw it with almost every government. And that's why we try to look at these issues when you have a little more advice from a balanced approach from, hopefully they'll do what we did back in '95 and become a real grassroots consulting party. That platform we had in '95, the Common Sense Revolution, wasn't our platform. It was because we consulted with people right across the province. And I think Tim is willing to go out and talk to these small communities. I know he's doing that now, talking to these communities. And that's important, because the party cannot tell the people what they want. The party has to pay attention to the people what they want and truly reflect their points of view, because that's when we get lost as politicians. We think we know better than the people. I think it's very important to consult with them.
This is 2 or 3 times, though, in this program where you have talked about Tim and made some kind of comparison to 1995.
Yep.
And I wonder, Donald, whether or not that's going to make the folks in Tim's office a little nuts. Because the one thing I'm not sure that they want to do is kind of go back to 1995. They want to look forward.
Well, I think that
I hope they do. I hope they do.
Oh, me too.
Sorry.
No, you're right. I think that
I'm getting old. I live in the past.
That's right.
95 was 15 years ago. I mean, if we're still making comparisons to what Mike Harris did or what people thought of Mike Harris,
and
at
the
the
Liberals
time,
win.
And well, there's also something to be said of the fact that if we run on what we believe in and we get people involved at the grassroots, we win as well. And actually, that's not even my line. That's Jim Flaherty's line.
No, and again, it
I don't mean win.
But it depends what the ballot question is.
I mean, they get to decide.
That's true, too.
It depends on what the ballot
Yeah.
question is. And I mean, if people think they need the strong medicine of 1995, then it's not so bad to be compared to Mike Harris.
This party was, I think it's fair to say, leading up to the leadership convention that took place in the summer of last year, pretty badly split. They picked John Tory at the previous convention in whatever that was, 2004, because they thought that he was the guy who was going to lead the urban renaissance, they hoped, and they thought they needed a kinder, gentler, a little softer face on things. And then he didn't win, and I guess things went pretty far south after that. So I guess job one of a new leader is to get everybody singing out of the same hymn book and getting together. How well's he done at that?
I think he's done quite well.
What's the evidence?
Well,
Jim Coyle of the Toronto Star wrote a very nice column about Tim, and that's one of the things he talked about, was the new spirit
he
in the
wrote
caucus.
9 nasty ones about him and 1 good one. Okay.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, with Jim, and I love Jim. Jim's great, but so I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that as.
Where's the evidence, O'Donnell, that
well, I think one very
that?
good piece of evidence, and I saw it at worked at Queen's Park for a little while, and I saw the evidence after Tim had become leader that the leadership candidates that ran against him now form a pretty solid alliance in caucus. And I also think that you're finding a very strong sense of camaraderie and team and of a team with caucus. That's something that you didn't see when John Tory was leader, to be frank. I mean, you didn't see Tory getting into members' offices and getting out to ridings and really getting to know caucus members and finding out what they're up to, even when he had no seat in the House. And that's something that I think is very important for a leader to do.
Well, Tim, after I mean, again, every leadership race is very hard fought, and his was as well. But as someone who had supported Christine Elliott, I mean, I was one of the people that he picked up the phone and called shortly after the leadership.
To say what?
Just to say, you know, thank you for what you did. Janet, you know, here's what I want to do. You know, what do you want to do? What's your advice? What do you think I should do? It was just a really good touch-base conversation.
Did you get the sense he was asking you this because he knows it's smart to call your opponents after it's over, or did he really want to hear what you had to say? Seriously.
First of all, I thought it was a very sincere call, but even if it wasn't, he did it well. And it's something that a leader of a party is supposed to do, and do it well.
See, this is why we keep inviting you back. Oh, that's a very good, that's a good, honest answer. That's right.
Yeah.
So even if he didn't mean it, he did it well.
That's right.
But you know, I was with Tim.
As I said, I thought he
But
meant
you
it.
thought he meant it.
Yeah,
Did you get a call afterwards?
Yeah, I did.
You got a call from Hudak?
Yeah.
What did he say to you?
Well, basically the same thing. I mean, look, I was with Tim at a couple of events where we went to, where Christine Elliott was speaking at, and so was Tim, and it's in Scarborough, in fact, in a writing association. And Tim was very gracious during the whole thing. I mean, I found the way he conducted himself was not a negative way. It was a way that's conducive for afterwards having people come together as one team, and that's what he did. I mean, I think he was very good at that.
I'm just going to beg the indulgence of the control room for a second here. I'm holding this up. Kevin, you're going to get a shot of this. This is, you know, the Liberals are having their annual general meeting this weekend. And we may see these, am I holding this well enough there? We may see these being handed out by some Conservative supporters at this thing. Tax revolt, roll back taxes. I guess my question is, Donald, does Tim Hudak want to lead an Ontario-style Tea Party?
I think that's a bit too early to say something like that. I think I think what he's really doing is speaking to voters' frustrations, and one of the things that I see across the GTA is this real revolt against high taxes and taxes that just never seem to stop hitting pocketbooks. I don't think it's a matter of a new style Tea Party. I think all he's doing is hearing the frustration of people who are paying taxes and paying too much in them, and he wants to do something about it. I think it's a bit too premature to call it a Tea Party revolution.
You want to call it a bit of a Tea Party? I mean, it was called a common sense revolution 15 years ago. You want to call it a Tea Party today?
And I want to just sorry, Janet. I also think that the association of a Tea Party here is just plain wrong. There's a reason the Tea Party exists in the U.S. And it's much more than just high taxes and, you know, tax revolt. It's a very, very different story down there. It's a comparison you couldn't possibly make to anything up here.
We didn't throw any tea in the harbor 250 years ago.
That too. Yeah.
But we did try to burn down the White House.
We did.
Yeah, way back then. or whatever they called it.
Does he want to be the Tea Party candidate up here? I mean, you look at the success of Rob Ford, for example, in the Toronto Mayoralty race, and a lot of people are making that connection that Rob Ford's the Tea Party candidate. You know, because we love these American
it's a great, I mean, you know, everybody in the political business loves to use sort of political shorthand when they describe things, but Ontario is not going to be Tea Party territory, and I think, I mean, it's just a much more moderate province, moderate political culture. It's not like some of the extremes of left, right, Democrat and Republic that we're seeing in the United States. So I think it is a very different kind of environment here.
Do you think he wants to kind of foment a Tea Party atmosphere? The government's got its fingers in your wallet too often. It's in your life. It's telling you what kind of junk food you can't have at school and can't smoke in your car.
Yeah, that's what. That's what I was going to say. You have to be concerned about taxes.
No, but in the States, it's the size of government thing.
But we're not the States. We're not Americans. We're Canadians. We're Ontarians. Like, you know, Jan's right. And like, we're not the extreme type of politics that are down there. It doesn't succeed up here. But you can be concerned about taxes without being a Tea Party, you know? Maybe it's a milk party, I don't know. But you know, the fact of the matter is, even me, I mean, I've been out of politics now for 7 years. I'm at the pump, you know, the gas pump, and people are coming up to me and complaining about the fact that they're paying HST on gas. And I keep on reminding them, I'm not your MPP. Actually, some of them didn't know that, but 7 years.
Here's his
So, but you know, so you can represent the feelings about people that think that's the taxes are too high. That's why I got into politics in the first place.
I understand that.
Taxes
Do you not find it interesting, though, that I mean, you guys prided yourself on the fact that, in fact, I remember Mike Harris saying this, by the time we're done, there will not be one blade of grass on the south lawn of Queen's Park that will not have been trod upon by some demonstrator, because we, you know, we aim to change things up, shake things up, do some real business. I can't think of one significant anti-HST protest that has taken place. Can you think of one? I don't see people out in the street.
But we didn't get it. I mean, BC did. You know,
BC did, because they went back on
talking. It was almost like a.
They promised not to, and then they did it.
Yeah, I know.
McGuinty
well, and
didn't
remember
promise
too,
not to.
BC's political culture has
different.
always been a little different from
I mean,
Ontario's.
look, honestly, I mean, if you want to be fair about this whole HST thing, why did they do the same thing as the Maritimes did? They lowered the total tax.
Right.
They gave a break to people. This was just a tax grab. But you know, look at 95, as people are telling me now, is different than now, which is true. And the view of Tim Hudak is different. I mean, look at Tim. All the time I've worked with him, he was more of a guy to work cooperatively and do some consensus building. He's and again, I keep on saying this, he is a bright young man. He gets it. He knows that times are changed. It's not 95, as much as I like 95, but things have changed.
Let me try this. 2 minutes to go here, Donald. You tried to run for a seat in Toronto City Council how many years ago?
Twice, 2000
03 and 06?
03 and 06.
03 and 06. So you know Toronto pretty well.
Yeah.
Can Tim, I'm trying to think, the last time Conservatives won any seats in the 416 was 1999.
This is in 99,
They have not won a single seat in the 416 in 11 years. Can Tim Hudak win seats in the 416?
I think that the time is right for it now. I think that the public is not only ready for a serious change, but the revolt is out there, to be sure. There is definitely a serious disappointment with the way that the current governing party has managed finances, the scandals that have come out, the $1 billion e-health that's, we still don't know where that money is. The things I think are ripe for Tim to finally get at least one seat, if not 3 or 4, within the city of Toronto. It'll be a while before we see the kind of numbers that we had when Mike Harris and Ernie Eves were in office.
I think Mike won 8.
Yeah, there were about 8 or,
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Can you win seats in the 416? Last 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'd say it depends. It depends on what the ballot question is. It depends on how well Tim defines himself and if he can do it in a way that does connect to voters, whether they live in rural or urban communities.
Okay. Thank you for this, everybody. While we've been having this discussion here in the studio, we've been having one online as well. And Mike Miner is at an undisclosed location in the building, and he's going to fill us in on what people have been saying online tonight. Go ahead, Mike.
Steve, a lot of people here just, they're very curious about who Tim Hudak is. They're not quite fully in election mode. And so far, they're a bit of a mixed bag on what they think about him. One person who signed in anonymously said that there's something about Tim Hudak that makes him look a little amateur. But he remembers a time when Dalton McGuinty wasn't up for the job and how he managed to burst out of that frame that had been set for him. Vera thinks, she's writing from Toronto, that a lot of people who are on the fence are going to be put off by all the conservative blame games. You think all she knows about Hudak so far is that he's very negative. Other people have said, you know, even still watching the show, it's hard to tell who this person is. You get the image of the family man, stuff like that, and they think, well, everyone has a family. I'm not quite sure what that is. Other people are pretty cynical. There's one guy who's, well, he signed in as Mike Miner fan. There's also a Steve Paikin fan. He says he's not impressed with the intellectual product that Hudak is putting out, but he's also not impressed with the Dalton McGuinty's moral product that he's putting out. But he'd take someone who has, you know, ideas and maybe some moral trouble as opposed to the other. So that's where they're coming at from online.
Thanks, Mike. Well, you know what they say, a week is a lifetime in politics, and we got 51 lifetimes until the next Ontario election. So stay tuned, everybody. Thanks a lot. Michael, should we thank the guests here? David Tabucci, Janet Ecker, Donald Blair. Donald, nice job. First time on our TV show. Thank you very much. Great to have you all in here tonight.